So just you had made Senator Cruz Captain Kirk. I'll be Captain Obvious. The need to fund NASA in the One Big Beautiful Bill was something that was very important. Would any of you disagree that without that $10 billion of funding, that it would be absolutely devastating to what we just talked about all morning? All in agreement?
In agreement.
And again, just want to point out there wasn't a single Democrat that voted for that bill. I think that I just want to make sure that's crystal clear on the record. So as important as we all said that is, as important as we say this is bipartisan, yet when the bill got presented, it was 100% of the Democrats voted against that bill. Let me just also say that when we talk about sequencing, how do we get to the moon? How do we get there before China? As I'm still the optimist. I think we can get there before China gets there. And there's sequencing that has to happen. Something has to happen before something else. And if we're going to have moon exploration, Mr. Cutler, you're going to be in Ohio next week. I'm sorry, I will miss you there. I'm sure you're going there because you're going to celebrate the massive victory of Ohio State versus Texas. But while you're celebrating that victory, talk about the importance of nuclear fission and the importance of really developing that program.
Well, first of all, I'm sure they're still celebrating. They've got a week, so it's great. I think, you're talking about nuclear fission. This committee, this Congress, has been supportive of all forms of nuclear, like if you're looking at propulsion, NTP, nuclear electric, it's something that we absolutely, if we want to open up our exploration of going beyond the moon, going to Mars, going even farther in the universe, we need to have better propulsion. This is something that we need to be working on. So the benefits, absolutely. There's only so much you can do with chemical propulsion. And if we want to really sit there and send ourselves out into the universe, we need to do something different. Now that's, nuclear fission, you've got that surface power. You need that too for the moon. Astronauts are going to plug all that. You go home, plug all your stuff into the wall, the recharge. It's going to be the same on the moon. You're going to need power. This is technologies that we should be working on and through this committee have been supporting for years, and we need to kind of up our game on that. It needs to be worked on, and it's absolutely critical.
And I saw you earlier talk about Secretary Duffy, Administrator Duffy, depending on what hat he's wearing, put some serious resources behind that.
Absolutely.
And where would you say is the center of excellence of nuclear fission for space power? Well, the only answer is Cleveland.
I know that when you're going nuclear electric, Cleveland is where you go.
There you go. Make sure that that's highlighted in the record. So in terms of, Lieutenant General, back to you, the coordination between the military and NASA, how important is it to us to really take that to the next level, to really get this done and to compete with China?
Yeah, Senator, first I'd say the Department of Defense and NASA have always cooperated from the very beginning. I mean, whether it was the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo missions, whether it's even under my recent commands that I had before I left uniformed service, the Department of Defense was providing the debris situation to NASA to make sure that the astronauts on the ISS were safe. And we actually had NASA representatives in the Operations Center at Vandenberg Space Force Base, where I was the commanding general, that watched that continuously, communicating with Houston and letting them know if a maneuver would be necessary for the ISS. So we've been and there are many, many more examples in ways that we've partnered in the past. Those will only become more important as we look to put a permanent human presence in the lunar environment, as I expect there will be parallel efforts for commercial capabilities in the lunar environment that may or may not involve humans, but they're going to do the sorts of things that some of my panel members have mentioned here before. And it's not just the lunar environment, it's the entire Earth-Moon system. Again, you don't get economic growth without security as well. And I do think as the Space Force matures, in addition to all the things it needs to do today to enable terrestrial warfighters and protect our capabilities in space, it's also going to involve a mission that provides awareness of hazards, awareness of threats, and a transparency in space that enables all of these activities. We're going to see that happen. It's happened in every other domain. The U.S. Navy and U.S. Coast Guard have done it from the very beginning in the maritime domain. You will see the U.S. Space Force do it in the future.
That's right. And obviously, taking that to the next level is critically important. And I'll wrap up the last question with you, Mr. Bridenstine. When you were the NASA administrator, you visited a lot of places. What was your favorite place that you visited while you were NASA administrator? There's only one answer there.
Cleveland,
also.
Ohio.
Cleveland is the right answer. Perfect. That's good. And if you could end with us, how important is it for us to unleash the private sector? Because we talked about a lot about competing with China.
Yeah.
And certainly China is a model. It's not the model I choose. It's not the model we would ever want to replicate. And I think the advantage we have is that we have this strong, thriving private sector. How do we really integrate that to accomplish the mission that we all want?
I think that's a great point and a great question. I think we've got to, as an agency, NASA needs to build infrastructure that the private sector can see how they plug in and benefit from it. And then you get these naturally forming public-private partnerships. For example, the Gateway, if they can see themselves plugging into the Gateway, they can utilize it. They'll make investments to do that. When I was at NASA, we created commercial low Earth orbit destinations. Of course, that's a capability to replace the International Space Station. We created commercial lunar payload services. That's a way to get landers to the surface of the moon. We have a commercial landing system for the moon. I will tell you that the architecture for that is extraordinarily strained, but I think it's an important capability, and we need to have as much commercial as possible. I will tell you that when it comes to commercial, we've got to make sure, and I said this a lot when I was at NASA, the only thing worse than a government monopoly is a private monopoly that the government is dependent on. So when we think about commercial, we have to have multiple providers that are competing against each other on cost and innovation and safety. And each of those providers has to go get customers that are not NASA. And if they're willing to do that and capable of doing that, then we can have this very robust, capability, this marketplace that I think will be thriving. But I think we got to be really careful about how we frame that.
I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate it. Sorry, Mr. Gold, I didn't ask you a question, but you're the most enthusiastic witness in the history of the Commerce Committee in my time in the Senate, by the way. So
let me be briefly enthusiastic for Cleveland, not only great in nuclear, but the leader in solar electric propulsion on the PP on Gateway. So thank you for the support, Cleveland and Glenn.
There you go. And as we're working through the Commerce Appropriations budget, let's make sure we keep that all at top of mind. But I want to thank all the witnesses for their testimony today. Senators will have until the close of business on September 10th to submit even more questions for the record, if that's possible. Because in the Senate, not everybody's made a point. Points have been made, but not by everybody is the mantra around here. So we'll see if you get more of the same questions. But the witnesses will have until the close of business September 24th to respond to those questions. And this concludes today's hearings. You guys, your stamina, 2 hours, fantastic. And the committee is adjourned.
Thank you.